Hello, 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 everyone, and welcome to another segment of Voices of Empowerment with Dr. B. I am your host and your conductor through through this reading. Actually, I am Dr. Bianca B. Lee, Miss B. Lee. Okay, I'm getting a little tongue twisted here because I'm distracted looking at something else and should be focused. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. How are you? Hope your Tuesday is has been a great one. I hope it's going well. I hope your week started off to an amazing, amazing start. Okay. Mine did. Mine did. I've had beautiful news, beautiful information, beautiful things happening over the course of the last few days, actually last few weeks, to be perfectly honest. So I'm grateful for that. I really, really am. But once again, I hope your week is starting off amazingly and your Tuesday has been awesome. And your Tuesday evening is one of relaxation. Hello, somebody. Okay. Alrighty, listen, we are going to, I try not to keep you too late on Tuesday nights because it's already 8 p.m. on the East Coast and I don't want to hold you. You know what I mean? I want you to have your evening. I want you to spend it with yourself, spend it with your family, you know what I mean, your partners, whatever the case, whatever you do on your Tuesday night, that is not for me to infringe on, okay? So I want to thank you so very much for being here, okay? We're reading through the amazing book Caste, The Origins of Our Discontent, written by the wonderful author Isabel Wilkerson. She has broken it down for us, you all, like no other. And for those of you all who do not have your copy, your very free copy, everything that we read here collectively is always free to you. Yes, we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Yes, we do accept donations. They are welcome, but they are not required, okay, to get your reading material. Whatever we have available, whatever we're reading from is yours for the asking, okay? Whatever you just ask me for it, inbox me with your email address that you would prefer to receive it because it is in ebook form. I will send it over to you personally, okay? Alrighty, but I'll give you that information at the very end. But for right now, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. We are airing multiple platforms on Clubhouse, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, all of those places, okay? And I want to thank everyone for who's here, for being here from whatever facet and platform you're here watching or listening through. Now, at any point that you hear anything during this chapter reading, right? I want you to say something, share your thoughts, share your feelings, use the comment section, use the chat section. That's what it's there for. Okay. Now, of course, I'm going to be reading and looking at the book, but periodically I look back and forth at the chat, at the comments, just to see, now if you're watching via the video platforms, your comment already automatically appears on the screen. Okay. But if you're watching and listening through Clubhouse, then I will go and see your chat, your comment, and I will say what it is and I will give voice to your words. Okay. Not a problem at all. It's not hard. You are important. Your words are very important to me and to all of us. And therefore, they will be honored and respected. Hello. All right. Alrighty, you all. So without further ado, like I said, I don't like to keep you long on Tuesday. Without further ado, we're going to go into the chapter reading, chapter 14 of this book, The Origins of Our Discontent. Okay, here we go. Chapter 15. It is entitled The Urgent Necessity of a Bottom Rung. It turns out that the greatest threat to a caste system is not lower caste failure, which in a caste system is expected and perhaps even counted upon, but lower caste success, which is not. Achievement by those in the lowest caste goes against the script handed down to us all. It undermines the core assumptions upon which a caste system is constructed and to which the identities of people on all rungs of the hierarchy are linked. Achievement by marginalized people who step outside the roles expected of them puts things out of order and triggers primeval and often violent backlash. Yeah, they can't stand our shine, you all. They hate us winning, which is why that is the best revenge. Beyonce said, the best revenge is your paper. Okay, hello, somebody. The scholar W.E.B. Du Bois recognized this phenomenon in his research into what happened after the end of the Civil War. The masters feared their former slaves' success, he wrote, far more than their anticipated failure. See? See? Decades after the Civil War, the entire world was at war and well into the fourth year of trench combat that was tearing Europe apart. The year was 1918, after the Americans had finally sent in their troops. The French welcomed the reinforcement during World War I, had badly needed help. The French began commanding some of the American troops, and it was then that the problems began. The French were treating the soldiers according to their military rank rather than their rank in the American caste system. They were treating black soldiers as they would white soldiers, and they would treat other human beings as they would treat other human beings, having drinks with them, patting their shoulders for a job well done. This rankled the white soldiers in an era of total segregation back home, and this breach had to be put to a stop. American military command informed the French of how they were to treat the black soldiers, clarified for them that these men were inferior beings. No matter how well they performed on the front lines, that it was of the utmost importance that they were treated as inferior. The fact that military command would take the time in the middle of the most of the one of the most vicious wars in human history to instruct foreigners on the necessity of demeaning their own countrymen suggests that they considered adherence to caste protocols to be as important as conducting the war itself. As it was, the white soldiers were refusing to fight in the same trenches as black soldiers and refusing to salute black superiors. Man, the American military communicated this position, and French commanders in turn had to convey the rules to their soldiers and officers who had come to admire the black soldiers and had developed a camaraderie with them. This indulgence and this familiarity, read the announcement, are matters of grievous concern to the Americans. They consider them an affront to their national policy. In apprising their officers of the new protocols, French command noted the contradictions given that the black American soldiers sent us have been the choices with respect to physique and morals. Still, in trying to translate the rules of the American caste system, the French command gave this directive. We cannot deal with them on the same plane as with the white American officers without deeply wounding the latter. We must not eat with them, must not shake their hands or seek to talk or meet with them outside of the requirements of military service. More pointedly, the French officers were told, we must not commend too highly the black American troops, particularly in the presence of white Americans. It is all right to recognize their good qualities and their services, but only in moderate terms. Wow. Later in the final months of the war, an African American soldier, Private Burton Holmes, was grievously wounded in a hail of machine gun fire and heavy German artillery in an ambush of his unit in September 1918. He managed to make his way back to the command post to exchange rifles because the one he had been given was malfunctioning. Commanders wanted to get him to the hospital for treatment, but he refused and rejoined the fight with a backup rifle. He continued to fire upon the enemy until his last breath. Another African American in Company C, Freddie Stowers, crawled into enemy shelling and led the assault on German trenches. He too died on the front lines defending France and America. White officers who had witnessed their bravery broke with Caste and nominated both men for the Medal of Honor. But this was the height of the eugenics era, when Black inferiority was near universal convention in American culture. The government refused to grant the medal to either soldier. The award intended for Holmes was downgraded to a lesser citation, and the recommendation for Stowers was lost for half a century. These actions were in keeping with societal norms that people in the lowest caste were not to be commended even in death, lest the living begin to think themselves equal, get uppity out of their place, and threaten the myths that the upper caste kept telling itself and the world. Wow, man. Ooh, the hate runs deep. Imagine Dr. Jeff Gusky, a physician who decades later took an interest in the case, told the Army Times in 2018. Imagine how powerful this would have been in the American press. If word got out that there were two black soldiers who died in this ambush and were both nominated for the Medal of Honor. A generation later, during the Second World War, there was continued resistance to the lowest caste rising from its assigned place, even in the most mundane of endeavors. One day in the spring of 1942, white Army officers happened to assign black soldiers to direct traffic in Georgia, Lincolnton, Georgia, as an Army convoy passed through. It caused an uproar in town. The sight of black men in uniform standing at an intersection, halting white motorists, apparently sent some resonance over the edge, wrote the historian Jason Morgan Ward. After the war ended in February 1946, Sergeant Isaac Woodard Jr. was riding a Greyhound bus home to North Carolina from Augusta, Georgia, where he had been honorably discharged, having served in the Pacific Theater. At a stop along the way, Woodard asked the bus driver if he could step off the bus to relieve himself. The driver told him to sit down, that he didn't have time to wait. Woodard stood up to the driver and told him, "I am a man just like you." Woodard had been out of the country and away from Jim Crow for 3 years, had served his country and taken on a degree of assertiveness and self-confidence that most Southern whites were not accustomed to nor prepared to accept. In the words of the Southern author and judge Richard Gurgle, the driver backed down for the time being, told him to go ahead then and hurry back. But at the next stop, outside Aiken, South Carolina, the bus driver noticed the police. There, the police chief arrested Woodard on charges of disorderly conduct. At the bus stop and later in jail, the police chief beat him and jabbed his eyes with a billy club, blinding him. The next day, a local judge found him guilty as charged, and though he asked to see a doctor, the authorities did not get him one for several more days. By the time he was finally transferred to an Army hospital, it was too late to save his eyesight. He was blind for the rest of his life. The NAACP brought the case to the attention of President Harry S. Truman, a Midwestern moderate who was incensed to learn that authorities in South Carolina had taken no action in the maiming of an American soldier. He ordered the Justice Department to investigate based on the fact that Woodard was in uniform at the time he was beaten, and that the initial assault occurred at a bus stop on federal property. But the federal trial ran into caste obstructions in South Carolina. The local prosecutor relied solely on the testimony of the bus driver who had called the police. The defense attorney hurled racial epithets in open court at the blinded sergeant. And when the all-white jury returned a not guilty verdict for the police chief, the courtroom broke out in cheers. It had been revealed during the trial that Woodard had apparently said yes instead of yes, sir, to the police chief during the arrest. This, combined with elevated position his uniform conveyed, was seen as reason enough for punishment in the caste system. After the trial, the police chief who had admitted jabbing Woodard in the eyes went free. Woodard went north to New York as part of the Great Migration. The northern white judge assigned to the case lamented, "I was shocked by the hypocrisy of my government." The message was clear to those whose lives depended on staying in their place or appearing to. If a Negro rises, he will be careful not to become conspicuous, lest he be accused of putting on airs and thus arouse resentment, wrote the ethnographer Bertram Shrike. Experience or example has taught him that competition and jealousy from the lower caste of whites often form an almost unsurpassable obstacle to his progress. It was largely Black efforts to rise beyond their station that set off the backlash of lynchings and massacres after Reconstruction following the Civil War that sparked the founding of the Ku Klux Klan and the imposition of Jim Crow laws to keep the lowest caste in its place. A white mob massacred some 60 Black people in Ocoee, Florida, on Election Day in 1920, burning Black homes and businesses to the ground, lynching and castrating Black men, and driving the remaining Black population out of town after a Black man tried to vote. The historian Paul Ortiz has called the Ocoee riot the single bloodiest election day in modern American history. It occurred amid a wave of anti-Black pogroms in more than a dozen American cities, from East St. Louis to Chicago to Baltimore, as Black Southerners arrived north during the Great Migration, and many tried to make their claims to citizenship after risking their lives in the Great War. One thing these rampages had in common: the mobs tended to go after the most prosperous in the lowest caste, those who might have managed to surpass even some people in the dominant caste. In the 1921 riot in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a mob leveled the sections of town that was called Black Wall Street, owing to the Black banking, insurance, and other businesses clustered together and surrounded by well-kept brick homes that signaled prosperity. These were burned to the ground and never recovered. Decades before, in the early 1890s, a Black grocery and a white grocery sat across the street from each other at an intersection just outside Memphis, Tennessee. The Black store, known as People's Grocery, was a cooperative that was thriving even on the walls of Jim Crow closed in. Its owner, Thomas H. Moss, was an upright figure in a three-piece suit and bow tie with a side part in his close-cropped hair, who did double duty delivering mail and running the grocery. Both he and his grocery store drew the resentment of his white competitor. One day, two boys, one Black and one white, were playing marbles in front of People's Grocery and got into an argument. The white boy's father began to thrash the Black boy, at which point two clerks from the Black grocery ran out to rescue him. A crowd gathered and tensions rose. Seizing on the discord and angered by the competition from the Black store to begin with, the white grocer, William Barrett, showed up at People's Grocery looking for one of the store clerks who had intervened in the fracas. But the clerk on duty, Calvin McDowell, refused him any information. The white grocer struck McDowell with a pistol for his perceived insolence. McDowell managed to wrestle the gun from the white grocer and fired, barely missing him. Under the protocols of the caste system, it was the Black store clerk who was arrested. Though he was released, the caste system had only begun to stir. The Black owner, Thomas Moss, tried to prepare for it. He stationed several Black men to guard the grocery. On March 5th, 1892, 6 white men stormed People's Grocery. The Black grocer and his supporters fired upon the intruders, wounding 2 of them. The white men happened to have been the sheriff, and 5 men had just deputized. After the shooting, 100 more whites were deputized to hunt down the Black store owner and other Black men who knew. The 3 Black storekeepers, the owner, Moss, and the 2 clerks, McDowell and Will Stewart, were arrested. In the early morning hours of March 9th, 1892, a mob stormed the jail and tortured and lynched all 3 men. The next day, a white mob ransacked People's Grocery, and within months, Moss's white competitor bought the store for pennies on the dollar. One of Moss's dear friends, as was the journalist Ida B. Wells, and this lynching is what set her on her lifelong mission to awaken the country to the terror of lynching. A finer, cleaner man than he never walked the streets of Memphis. Wells wrote, "He was murdered with no more consideration than a dog. The colored people feel that every white man in Memphis who consented in his death is as guilty as those who fired the guns which took his life." The irony of the quest of the lowest caste is that it is the very uprightness embodied by Moss, attested to by Wells, and applauded when shown by most every other group, that incites the greatest backlash. The effort to escape stigma is what can trigger the punishment. Moss was murdered for running a better business than his white competitor, wrote Nathaniel C. Ball, a historian at the Hooks Institute at the University of Memphis. McDowell for forgetting his place in the hierarchy in the white world he lived in, and Stewart for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The lowest caste was to remain in its place like an ill-fitted suit that must constantly be altered, seams and darts resewn to fit the requirements of the upper caste, going back to the enslavers who resented displays of industriousness and intellect in the people they saw themselves as owning. When slaves earned money, they became vain and arrogant, wrote the historian Kenneth Stamp, and felt more independent. They were not to be credited for their ideas or innovation, even at the risk of progress for everyone. Crediting them would undermine the pretext for their enslavement, meaning their presumed inferiority in anything other than servitude. In the summer of 1721, an epidemic of smallpox, one of the deadliest afflictions of the era, besieged the city of Boston. It sent stricken people into quarantine, red flags signaling to all who might pass, God have mercy on this house. Cotton Mather was a Puritan minister and lay scientist in Boston and had come into possession of an African man named Onesimus. The enslaved African told of a procedure he had undergone back in his homeland that protected him from this illness. People in West Africa had discovered that they could fend off contagions by inoculating themselves with a specimen of fluid from an infected person. Mather was intrigued by the idea Onesimus described. He researched it and decided to call it variolation. Variolation. It would become the precursor to immunization and the holy grail of smallpox prevention for Western doctors and scientists, wrote the medical ethicist and author Harriet A. Washington. During the 1721 outbreak, Mather tried to persuade Bostonians to protect themselves with this revolutionary method, but did not anticipate the resistance and rage, the horrid clamor that arose from the Bostonians. The idea sounded outlandish to them. They feared it could spread smallpox all the more. And they also wanted nothing to do with the practice that had come from Africa and had been suggested by an African slave. Physicians dismissed the procedure out of hand and resented being told by a gaggle of ministers that Africans had devised the panacea they had long sought. Washington wrote, rage turned to violence when someone hurled a lighted grenade into Mather's house. Mather escaped serious injury, but wrote that he could see no difference between adopting the African solution for smallpox and using the Native Americans' antidote for snake venom, which the colonists had readily taken up. Only one physician, Zabdiel Bolstone, was willing to try the new method. He inoculated his son and the enslaved people he owned. In the end, the epidemic would wipe out more than 14% of Boston's population. But of the 240 people that Bolstone had inoculated, only 6 died, 1 in 40, as against 1 in 7 people who forewent inoculation. By 1750, vaccinations based on the method introduced by Onesius would be standard practice in Massachusetts and later in the rest of the country. What is clear is that the knowledge of he passed on saved hundreds of lives and led to the eventual eradication of smallpox, wrote the author Aaron Blake Moore. It remains the only infectious disease to have been entirely wiped out. For this contribution to science, for his contribution to science, Onesius does not appear even to have fully won his freedom. What little that is known is that Mather grew sour on him, and Onesius managed to buy partial freedom by paying Mather money toward the purchase of another slave. He had gone well beyond what would have been expected of a man of the lowest caste, and as often happens, does not appear to have reaped the rewards for a role that was beyond his station. That says that's a lot. That happens a lot in our history and with the people from our history, ancestors and things like that, contemporaries. They 100% had major contributions, especially in the medical arena, and are not even mentioned. Okay. Instead, the rewards and privileges flowed from upholding the caste order. Doing so could boost the prospects of those who knew to stay in their place. The more conspicuous, the better. 2 centuries after Onesimus' day, the Jim Crow regime would make a single exception to its iron law of segregation between blacks and whites. It was for black maids who had shown themselves sufficiently faithful to be entrusted with the care of white children. These women alone could ride in the whites only section of a train or bus if they were out taking care of the white child. This exception served several purposes. It enshrined the white children as the ticket to a first class seat for a black person. It reinforced the servile role, the natural place of the subordinate caste. It elevated the black nursemaid by fiat of the dominant caste. It made domestics superior to even the likes of the great orator Frederick Douglass, who was once reduced to sitting on top of cargo on a train journey. It protected the children of the dominant caste from enduring for a single trip the taint and discomforts of the colored car. And it reminded everyone in the subordinate caste that they would only rise with the permission of the dominant caste and on its terms, and only as long as they kept to the role assigned to them. They were to be given no quarter, no latitude to imagine themselves in any other place than the bottom rung. From Reconstruction to the Civil Rights era, Southern school boards spent as little as 1/10 the money on black schools as for white schools, openly starving them of resources that might afford them a chance to compete on level ground. School terms for black students were made shorter by months, giving them less time in class, more time in the field for the enrichment of the ruling caste. In hiring black teachers for segregated schools during Jim Crow, a leading Southern official, Hoke Smith, made a deliberate decision. When two Negro teachers applied to a school to take the less competent, my God, it was a nakedly creative way to cripple black prospects for achievement. It put black children under the instruction of the least qualified teachers. It passed over the brightest, most accomplished applicants, in fact, punished excellence while elevating the mediocre in a purposeful distortion of meritocracy. All of this created dissension in the lowest caste over the patent unfairness and worked to crush the ambitions of those with the most talent. In these and other ways, the caste system trained the people in the lowest caste that the only way to survive was to play the comforting role of servile incompetent. The caste system all but ensured black failure by preempting success. In a caste system, there can be little allowance for the disfavored caste to appear equal, much less superior at some human endeavor. In the early years of the Third Reich, the Nazis made a point of excluding Jews from any position or circumstance in which they might outshine Aryans. This extended to classrooms in which the Berlin Gestapo went to the trouble of ordering that everything must be done to put an end to the appearance that Aryan students are receiving assistance from Jews in preparing their exams. These were the ways that, irrespective of the natural range of intelligence and talent arising in any human subset, the people in the dominant caste are artificially propped up as superior in all things, a setup for disillusionment, not of their own making. That is true. The caste is artificially propped up. So even them with their roles, their highest roles, they're up there not because of their skill and talent, not because of their ability and intellect. They're up there because of they're in the upper caste. Okay, it says a lot about nepotism too today. All right. If one of the requirements of a hierarchy is that the lowest caste must remain the scapegoat on the bottom, the culture works to keep it that way by playing up the stereotypes that affirm their lowliness and minimizing indications to the contrary. In America, news outlets feed audiences a diet of inner city crime and poverty so out of proportion to the numbers that they distort perceptions of African Americans and of societal issues as a whole. Little more than 1 in 5 African Americans, 22%, are poor, and they make up just over a quarter of poor people in America at 27%. But a 2017 study by Travis Dixon at the University of Illinois found that African Americans account for 59% of the poor people depicted in the news. White families make up 2/3 of Americans poor at 66%, but account for only 17% of poor people depicted in the news. These generations old distortions shape popular sentiment. A political scientist at Yale, Martin Gillens, found in a 1994 study that 55% of Americans believed that all poor people in America were Black. Thus, a majority have come to see Black as a synonym for poor, a stigmatizing distortion in a country that glorifies affluence. Like poverty, crime too receives coverage out of the proportion into the numbers. Crimes involving a Black suspect and a white victim make up 42% of the crimes reported on television news, even though crimes with white victims and Black suspects make up a minority of crimes at 10%, according to the Sentencing Project, an advocate for criminal justice reform. For generations, the culture was decried the alarming rate of births among Black teenagers, often accompanied by the depiction of welfare dependency. Even though the majority of teenage mothers of all races are unmarried and likely to require help. But one might not know from news coverage that the rate of Black teenagers giving birth has plummeted in the recent decades from 118 per 1,000 Black teenagers in 1991 to 28 per 1,000 in 2017, according to 2019 analysis by the nonprofit research institute Child Trends. This should be considered great news for society. The turnabout in birth rates for Black and Latino teenagers has helped bring the overall teenage pregnancy rate to the lowest levels recorded in the modern era. Yet, what little media coverage there has been has tended to revert to familiar caste tropes about unemployment and poverty, language of the 1990s, rather than looking into the reasons for the historic decline. These numbers are clearly telling us something, and they do not fit caste assumptions. The long term downward trends, the researchers wrote, may reflect that teenagers are increasingly likely to delay sex and, if sexually active, to use contraceptives more carefully, meaning that Black and Latina teenagers are taking precautions at a rate that is bringing them closer to the mainstream, an outcome contrary to societal expectations and thus largely disregarded. The investment in the established hierarchy runs sufficiently deep that people in the dominant caste have historically been willing to forego conveniences to themselves to keep the fruits of citizenship within their own caste. After the Supreme Court outlawed segregation in public schools in Brown versus Board of Education in 1954, the white-run school board in Prince Edward County, Virginia, delayed integrating as long as it could and then shut down the school system entirely rather than to allow the Black students into classrooms with white students. The county had no public schools for 5 years, from 1959 to 1964, forcing parents of both races to find alternatives for their children. Local whites diverted government funds to private academies for white students, while Black parents, whose tax dollars were now going to the white students, had to make do on their own. Around the same time, civil rights legislation outlawed segregation in public facilities, and in response, cities in the South closed, auctioned off, or poured concrete into their whites only pools so that nobody could swim, rather than sharing the water with Black people. But those in the dominant caste had the means and resources acquired over generations of collective income and wealth disparities to build private pools behind gated communities for themselves and their children, leaving the lowest caste locked out again. It is in these ways that a caste system shapeshifts and protects its beneficiaries. A workaround emerges, provisions are made, and the hierarchy remains intact, even in the face of challenges from the highest authority in the land. This is how a caste system, it seems, manages always to prevail. In group out group tensions remain a feature of American life. When Black teenagers attended a pool party in a predominantly white gated community in McKinney, Texas in 2015, white residents called the police on them for trespassing. Afterward, as shown in a video that drew international attention, an officer who responded to the call yanked a 15-year-old girl from the sidewalk, slammed her to the ground face down, and pinned her with his full weight. Here was a grown man with his knee bearing down on her slight. bikini-clad frame as she sobbed helpless beneath him. When black boys instinctively rushed to help her, the officer pointed his gun at them and they backed away. The full power of the state treating them not as children, but as threats to society. It was a scene that could be hard to imagine occurring with a young girl from the same caste, the dominant caste, as the officer. Within days, the officer resigned, but the incident demonstrated the depths of assumptions about who belongs where in a caste society, and the instantaneous walls erected and punishments meted out for breaching those boundaries, even in our era. My goodness, man. And I do remember that video. I'm pretty sure you all do too. This is so, it's a cancer. It's so deep seated. It really is. But we have to, in order for us to really understand how to bring a change, even if we're just bringing the change, you all, from our own four walls, let's start there. We got to start somewhere. You know what I'm saying? Miss Celeste on Facebook says, yes, this was wild. I live minutes away. Do you hear me? So crazy. Hello, Miss Celeste. How are you, my love? Thank you. So it's just, oh my God. This is heartbreaking. And this is the world that we live in, you all. It is the world that we live in. The more and more that I read of this, I kid y'all not, the more and more that I read this book, and we are just concluding chapter 15. We're going to be doing chapter 16 on Sunday. But the more and more that I read this book, it's heartbreaking. I'm not going to lie. It's very difficult to digest at times. Some chapters are much, much harder than others because she gets down to the truth of the matter. She does not mince words in this book. I'm telling you now. And I love that. I love that for us. Because how often has books, history books, changed the narrative and did not tell the truth of the matter? Y'all gonna gag at the book that we're reading next, okay? But we gotta face it. We gotta confront this stuff. We gotta learn what the true story is and not the muddled down, watered down, muted, changed, altered story that history tries to make us believe it was. No, man. Every time I read each chapter of this book, I cannot help but to see and envision my ancestors. I cannot help to do it. I have to do it because it was them that endured through those times. My mama was born in 1960. That was still during the Great Migration. And yes, my grandmother, her mom, who everybody, my mom too, was born in Clarksdale, Mississippi, right? In the Delta, where it was thick. My grandmother migrated to Chicago, Illinois, which is where I was born. My mother was 9 years old. And my grandmother fought tooth and nail. My grandmother, who also worked the fields, people, because trust and believe, segregation, slavery was not that long ago. Hello. My grandmother, her brother, my Uncle George, her dad, they were all in the field. All right? This is no joke. This is for real. And when I read these stories, when I read these chapters, it's like, my God, I grow more and more. I'm heartbroken at what they went through, but I grow more and more and more in so much love and gratitude, man, for my ancestors, because you endured long enough through this BS to ensure that I am here today. Do you hear me? And I don't care what the dominant caste tries to keep me from doing. I promise you, just as sure as my name is what it is, when I reach out to do it, it's getting done. I'm not taking no for an answer. I'm not taking walls. I don't care. I will climb, bulldoze through them. It is what it is. I'm doing everything that my ancestors could not. You better believe that. You better believe that. I have a coffee mug that says Miss, Mrs. And then it has slashes through Miss, Mrs., whatever. And then it has slashes through them and it says, actually, it's doctor. It's not any of the misses and all of that. It's doctor actually. Okay? It's doctor actually. Because my grandmother couldn't pursue that. My grandmother was one of the best medicine women, conjure women out here. You understand? People travel far and wide to come and get her, her medicine and her treatments and things like that. But she couldn't pursue medical medicine. She couldn't produce it. She couldn't pursue it, I should say. But when she migrated to Chicago, she told her daughters, my grandmother had 3 girls, one being my mother. My mother was the oldest. My grandmother said, I don't care what happens. You're going to work. You're going to go to school. My grandmother had a 3rd grade education, but she made sure that her daughters went to school. They all graduated. They all have degrees. They all became entrepreneurs while being mothers. They were young moms, young wives. And she kept the kids, but they're going to go to school. You're going to school. You're going to go to school. And at that time, I'm quite sure they probably didn't understand it and why and this and the third. I can guarantee you today, we honor it, we respect it, and it's getting done. Not only do I have a doctorate, I also have an additional bachelor's. I have an associate in accounting. I have a doctorate in cognitive behavioral. I have a bachelor's in ABA, and pursuing an additional one for clinical mental health counseling here in Tennessee. I just relocated here in Tennessee. And that's another step that they require here in order for us to practice here. But in the meantime, I'm working with the school system, the district, working with the children for behavioralism and ABA and things like that. Oh, I'm getting it done. You better believe it. I'm getting it done. You had better believe it. And that's the field that I'm in, coming from the beauty arena where I opened 2 successful salons in Georgia. And then prior to that, had a successful music career. Writer, composer, musician, background singer. Okay? President of a record label. Stop playing. We're going to do everything that we set out to do with no one stopping us. The only person that can stop me is me. And I don't plan on doing it ever. These are the reasons why we have to continue to do what it is that we are called and positioned and divinely ordained to do. No excuses. None. They didn't have any. They couldn't fall back on excuses. They had to live. They had to survive. And because they survived, I'm here. You're here. We owe it to them. We owe it to ourselves, and we owe it to our ancestors who pushed beyond every obstacle as long as they could to ensure that we get to sit here and read about the things that they went through. Yes, we have our stuff that we deal with. Yes, we do. I will not take that away from us. But I tell you what, they proved for us that it can be done. Therefore, it shall. It shall. I think every last one of us got to have that internal assertiveness, that fire. You got to have that fire. I refuse to be told no. I refuse. I refuse. If I envision it, it's good as done. Bottom line. However long it takes, I don't know. I don't care. That's not my business. That's the universe's way. That's the universe's business to guide me in the right direction. It'll happen when it's supposed to. But I can guarantee you it's going to get done. Because I have everything in me to get it done. And our ancestors saw that. They knew it. Even before they knew us, they knew it. That's why. Beyonce said it. I said it at the top of the segment. Beyonce said it. The best revenge is your paper. That's the best revenge. Don't stoop to their level. That's why dandyism came about. It offended the white folks of that time to see Black people in nice tailored suits. It was offensive. They didn't have to say a word. Put that ish on and just walk. Huh? You mad or no? Like Plies said, he said, look at you. He said, I'm not finna argue with you. You mad. You big mad. Yeah. Because not only did we put it on, we also made it. Hello. We made it. We made the suit, then put the suit on. Hello. Man, please. This is what it is. When we understand who we are, and we understand why we're here, we understand what we have on the inside of us and what we're supposed to do with it. I promise you that boldness and that confidence, that solar plexus activity will be 100% activated. That throat chakra will be activated. That heart chakra will be activated. That root chakra, the sacral, that crown will be fully activated. Fully activated. We will not conform to the foolishness of this world. We are not from here. We got to tighten up. Understand who we are. Understand who we are. And then operate from the knowing of who we are. That's it. That is it. My goodness, you all. So the next chapter, you all, that we're going to go into, that's on Sunday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, chapter 16. It is entitled Last Place Anxiety, Packed in a Flooding Basement. Last Place Anxiety, Packed in a Flooding Basement. Okay? So that is Sunday. If you don't have the book, if you do not have the book, reach out to me. Send me a message. Send me an inbox, whatever you have to do with the email address that you prefer to get your book sent to. It is an ebook version. Every piece of literature that we read collectively here on Voices of Empowerment is available to you for free. It's available to you, okay? So get your copy. I don't mind. I will send it to you personally. Get your copy. However, you got to reach out to me. Reach out to me. For those on Clubhouse, there's a link right above my head to send you straight to my website. Go there. Send me a message. I will get your message. Everybody else who is watching on the video aspects, go and send me an inbox. I will with your email address, and I will send it to you. Okay. Alrighty. You can email me also at info@biancamissblee.com. For those who are watching via video, it is on the screen. info@biancamissblee.com. Okay. You can also visit my website, biancamissblee.com. Okay, go there, see my services, merchandise, things like that you can take advantage of. Look at the updated major astrology transits. I am an astrologer. I do readings and things like that as well. So birth chart readings, all of that stuff. Okay. So go there and become familiar with everything that is active and working for you right now. Okay. Whether you realize it or not, you are interconnected with all things cosmic. Okay. You are a cosmic being as well. You're interconnected with everything that's happening out there. Those planets are not out there just for decorations. All right. They are there for a reason, and they affect you. So go to the website and you'll be able to see different couple of videos just to see what's happening right now in the cosmos and how you can harness the energy of those placements. Okay. Alrighty, you all. That is it for right now. I love you. I mean it. There is absolutely positively nothing you can do about it. Don't you even try it. We will be back here on Sunday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on Voices of Empowerment with Dr. B. Have a great rest of your evening. Peace.